Nerd alert! Learning is important, right?
Yes, exactly. What a bunch of nerds.
Nerd alert!
Right.
Marketing Architects.
Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Jasper. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rob DeMars, the Chief Product Architect of Misfits and Machines.
Hello!
Hello, we're back with your weekly Nerd Alert. Every week, I'll take a deep dive into academic marketing research and translate its complex ideas into simple, understandable language for Rob, and of course, for all of you. Are you ready to nerd out, Rob?
I put an extra scoop of nerd berries on my cereal this morning, so I am full and ready.
Perfect. Let's get into it. As always, we'll link the research we cover in the episode notes. This week, I read a study titled, When Does Retargeting Work? Information, Specificity in Online Advertising. This is by Anya Lambret and Catherine Tucker. But before I get into things, Rob, let me ask you this. When was the last time you were retargeted excessively for a product you had already looked at? And can you remember what it was?
I actually can't. To be honest with you, I do so much of my product searches now on ChatGPT and Gemini. I think I'm off the radar. I think I'm not being retargeted anymore because I never go to I never go to do a standard Google search.
Well, that wouldn't necessarily change it. Like if you went to someone's website and bought something, they could pixel you and start retargeting you.
Yeah, I'm not going to see it because I don't go there. Where are they going to retarget me? I'm not going to.
Oh, you don't go on Instagram. You don't go.
Oh, hell no.
You exist in ChatGPT pretty much exclusively
I live in ChatGPT. I don't go to any of that crap.
Yeah, you don't. It's true. Actually, you don't go on Facebook. You don't go on Instagram.
I want the fake world. I
yeah,
don't want
you're
the
in
real
like
world.
Zoom chats, Microsoft Outlook, and ChatGPT.
And
like
ChatGPT. Yeah, that's it.
And you must be happier than the average individual, I think.
I'm pretty happy because ChatGPT really likes me too.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it
tells
keeps
you what you want
agreeing
to hear.
with me. I get all that I need, so I'm good. I don't need this retargeting. I'm impossible to retarget to. I'm like Teflon.
Well, unlike Rob, I am addicted to social media, and
so you give the answer then. What have you been hounded by recently?
I could tell you a million things, like because
give me one.
One recent thing is I have this right here. I've had an Achilles injury from running, and I've been targeted. I've been looking up excessively, like how do I heal this? Like what magic beans do I need to consume to get my ankle better in time for triathlons? And I bought a lot of stuff, Rob. I bought a ton of stuff you wouldn't even believe. Like anything they send me, I'm like, let me try it. But I have this wooden block called a sidekick, and you can like change the configurations of it and you kind of balance on it to help improve your Achilles strength. And I already bought it, and I've just been retargeted still excessively with ads for this. And I'm like, I bought it. I fell for it.
What a waste of money. What a waste of money for
I think
them,
it's working,
though, right?
Actually.
No. I mean,
on me.
For you, it's great.
Totally.
Yeah, but
I already bought it.
Like you just keep hitting a buyer over and over and over.
Definitely, I already bought it. It worked. I don't need another one. So yeah, exactly. Just a waste of money. Well, let's talk about the study. This paper does something rare in marketing research. It asks a painfully practical question and then answers it with a large-scale field experiment. The question is simple. Does showing someone an ad for the exact same product they just viewed, so this isn't even purchased, they just viewed online, actually increase the chance they'll buy it? So let's set the stage. You've probably experienced this. You browse, say, a hotel on a travel website. Maybe you poke around, you look at a few places, and then you leave. You didn't book. A few hours or days later, you're scrolling another site, and there it is, an ad for that exact hotel plus 3 similar ones. That's called dynamic retargeting. And on paper, it should work. It's personalized, it's relevant, it's data-driven. Some companies claim it performs 4 to 6 times better than standard ads. But what this study found was, on average, dynamic retargeted ads were less effective than generic brand ads. So Rob, when you hear that, personalized retargeting ads underperform generic ads, what's your gut reaction? Why do you think that might be the case?
I think everybody will throw out there that our consumers getting creeped out by them, which could be the case. But I also think we just had our own case study of, okay, you bought already, and now you're being retargeted that many times over. You're not even a buyer anymore. So I don't know, is the overall concept of it, like how often do you have to stock someone to buy? And once they've bought, are you just going to keep stocking them?
Agreed. And we talked about something similar to this in an episode recently about overfrequency and how if you're hitting the same user a second time, a third time, a fourth time, a fifth time, it has to perform twice as well, 3 times as well. So I think it's also, when you speak about performance, I can see how it'd get harder to get a return from this instead of just hitting somebody new. for the first time. But let's talk about how the researchers got to this. They partnered with a major travel company and ran a real world experiment. People who would browse the company's websites were then shown two types of ads: a generic ad showing a vacation like beach scene with the brand logo, and a dynamic ad showing the exact same hotel that person had looked at along with a few similar ones. And then they tracked which ad led to more purchases. Surprisingly, the generic ad did better, but here's where it gets interesting and important. The team didn't stop at the what, they asked why. And it turns out the effectiveness of dynamic ads wasn't static. It depended on one key thing: where the customer was in their journey. When people were early in their process, maybe they're just browsing ideas for a vacation, they were less likely to respond to highly specific ads. In fact, those ads might have felt too pushy or maybe irrelevant to their mindset. But when people had done their research, specifically when they visited a review site like a TripAdvisor, that's when the dynamic ads started to shine. That visit to a review site turned out to be a signal that the customer had narrowed in their preferences. They were no longer just dreaming about a beach vacation, they were comparing hotels, weighing options, getting ready to book. That's when showing that exact hotel paid off. So the insight here, it's not just about dynamic ads, it's how we interpret intent. Marketers, we often assume that visiting a product page is a high intent signal, but this study suggests it might not be. People browse for all kinds of reasons: curiosity, boredom, early stage planning. A product view doesn't mean they're ready for a hard sell, but something like a review site visit, that's different. That shows they're thinking seriously. They're comparing options, reading the fine print, preparing to make a choice. So this subtle shift from vague curiosity to narrow preference is what makes a specific ad work. And then the researchers took it another step further. They looked at what happened when people who had visited a review site were also browsing travel-related content, like travel blogs or destination guides, at the moment they were served the ad. That's when dynamic ads were the most effective. It was like this stack of signals. They've narrowed their preferences, they're actively thinking about travel, and now they see the personalized offer, and everything clicked. So, Rob, we talk a lot about message and audience fit, but this study, it shows it's also about that right moment fit. So how do you think marketers can get better at spotting these right time moments to target an ad?
I don't know. I was thinking about this a lot because it's a really interesting study. And when you think about, I mean, it's kind of the magic trick of going, where in the funnel are you catching someone, right? Because that's really what we're talking about, is just a really good understanding of the funnel and where people are at in the funnel, and then making sure you're not hitting them too hard up front. And as they're getting close to their buying moment, how does your message change? I think that's going to really vary by brand. It's going to vary by category, and it's going to vary by how much time does it take for someone to make a buying decision based on the category. Some categories are more impulsive, some are long. Travel is one of those that you don't tend to do impulsively, you tend to research. So, how do you make sure that you're meeting them at the right moment? I think moment marketing, if that's kind of what they're calling it, is almost another really interesting category for marketers to investigate. Because again, I don't know if anyone has really cracked the code on that.
I agree. I thought this, and there's a little more to the study, I thought it was so interesting, but thinking about how to practically apply this is not as simple. And it leaves me with two ideas for someone listening to this. They're like, oh, I want to change my retargeting strategy. First of all, overall, you might be over retargeting, I'd say. We'll keep doing the study.
Mm-hmm.
But
Sure.
I feel like there are two solutions in my mind, because we all know data is so inaccurate. Like, you could maybe subscribe to a solution, try to figure out how to target these exact moments, but depending on what you're saying, your category, this is all going to change. Yeah, looking at a review site when you're for travel, that's such a very specific use case, and not everybody has that in their head. What's the equivalent of that for my brand? So, option one, this is probably why broad reach and mental availability work well. If you can't figure out the moment, be ever present, right? Like, just
Yes.
be around in general as much as you can through broad reach mediums. Or number two, maybe there's something here with contextual advertising where you're not relying on third party data, but you're thinking about, like, what would be those moments where someone is getting really close to making a purchase in my category? Like, where are they probably nearing that final purchase, and how could I show up in that situation to be contextually relevant to them?
I think it's a super important conversation, but it makes me nervous because anytime you give marketers a dial to turn, they end up spending a lot of money to turn that dial, and they create a lot of waste. If someone starts to really hawk we figured out moment marketing. It's like hyper targeting. You start to run into the same issues, and you go, well, are you really gaining at the end of the day versus your point of just, a broader reach is going to give you a better result anyways, because you're not paying as much.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to think of ways around it, because it's sort of the same problem with hyper targeting. It's like, all right, well, now I figured out, quote unquote, exactly how to target the right buyer at the right time with the right message. All right, say you even figured that out, which I would doubt. How expensive is it? Because unfortunately, you might have just gone through all this pain when you could have paid the same cost and reached like 10 times the audience. But hey, figuring it out, I mean, I get how that feels good.
And you got a whole bunch of secondary audiences to boot, so it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, like I'm with you.
Well, I've got just a little bit more of this study. To make sure this wasn't just a fluke of a field experiment, the authors also ran a lab study, which I thought was kind of interesting. They split people into two groups. One imagined they were early in their planning of, say, like, I want a beach vacation. The other imagined they had specific preferences, aka, like, I want a beach hotel in Hawaii with a pool. Sounds so nice. Then they showed each group either a generic or dynamic ad. And it was the same results. Generic ads worked better for early stage thinkers. Dynamic ads worked better for those with well-defined preferences. So the takeaway here is strong in both ways they looked at this. Don't assume that personalization is always better. It depends on whether the customer is ready to process and act on that level of detail. The biggest mistake marketers make is using the right message at the wrong time. Dynamic retargeting isn't broken, but it's often misused. And if your customer isn't ready, if they're still figuring out what they want, then pushing specific products just doesn't land and is probably a waste of money. So the smartest advertisers aren't just targeting people based on what they've seen. They're waiting for the right signal that the person is ready to decide. Now for our Rob GPT, think of retargeting like solving a case. You don't show your suspect the final piece of evidence until you've followed the clues. A dynamic ad is the big reveal, but if you show it before the story makes sense to them, it just feels confusing. Timing makes the reveal stick. That's a new metaphor.
It is. Good job. Good job, ChatGPT. That's a fresh one. Getting smarter. I think it's that 4.1 model they just released. Getting craftier. No, I think that this was a really good one. This is really interesting. And again, I think it becomes another one of those like vocabulary words that we get to debate in terms of moment and whether or not it's effective, and time will tell.
Yeah, it's another reminder too with most marketing things. The conclusion from that study is not retargeting sucks. It depends. Everything depends.
Totally.
That's the ultimate
Everything
answer
depends
for everything in marketing. But kind of interesting information to consider nonetheless. That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. We'd like to thank Taylor De Los Reyes for producing the show. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you like the podcast, please leave us a review. Now go forth and build great marketing.
Marketing Architects.